Anyone who's ever watched a single Terminator movie might know of the influence that Sarah Jeanette Connor had on the franchise, even if her role is rather shrouded in mystery and puts her in the background of major events. However, she did have quite an impactful role in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and she's known for the way she raises John Connor, leads the resistance during the future war, and even trains John in military tactics and warfare. However, her disappearance after T2, paired with her tendency to live off the grid, might have confused you just as it confused me. So today, I'll be looking into what exactly happened to Sarah after Judgment Day and tell you all about her story arc. So what actually happens to Sarah after T2 in the T3 timeline? All this confusion started when I finished T2 and realized that she doesn't really play a role in Rise of the Machines, which led me down this rabbit hole of understanding just how exactly she trained John. Well, as it turns out, she stays off-screen and lives as a ghost who looks out for her child until she eventually passes away after a fight with leukemia at some point between the original Judgment Day date in 1997 and 2003. After Terminator 2 Judgment Day ends with Sarah driving John down the highway, her fate is left ambiguous, especially in the aftermath of the T-1000's destruction. While John had barely survived the attack himself, he made a striking appearance in the 2003 sequel, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, but fans couldn't help but notice how this film had dropped the iconic Sarah Connor from the storyline. To make up for her absence, John's character explains that Sarah had died due to leukemia between 1997 and 2003, and that he had been all alone in this world as he continued to lead the resistance from an underground bunker. It's also stated that Sarah had not only trained John in the ways of warfare, but had also done everything in her power to prevent Judgment Day from happening. The exact date of her death is allegedly stated as August 29, 1997, about 3 years after her initial diagnosis in Baja, and she was apparently cremated in Mexico. Moreover, her friends had scattered her ashes into the sea to give her a proper funeral, but at the same time, if you can trust anyone to take care of John and look out for him from beyond the grave, it is Sarah. As it turns out, Sarah believed that they might have lost even in the end, and she had tasked her friends with storing weapons in an empty coffin in a mausoleum in the Valley of Peace Cemetery. John himself realizes this when he visits her empty coffin and discovers a secret weapon stashed in it, which only goes to prove that she had been planning for the war even in death. What if Sarah actually got her happy ending? While Terminator 2 Judgment Day's finale marked Sarah Connor's story arc ending in the franchise, an alternate director's cut had entirely changed her fate and explored the idea of her getting a happy ending. In this deleted ending, Sarah's character can be seen as an elderly woman who sits on a park bench and watches her grandchildren playing, and this scene was supposedly situated about 30 years after the events of T2. This director's cut version entirely rewrote the franchise's canon and established John as a senator, while Skynet had never really begun its war on humanity. Even though these stories never made it to canon, it's still a happy thought to think of Sarah living a happy life and making it to old age, especially since none of her character arcs, including the Sarah Connor Chronicles, have put a positive spin on her ending. This alternate ending was truly a uniquely hopeful version of Sarah's fate in a world where Judgment Day never happened, and she got a chance to experience something as simple and radical as peace and old age. And in my opinion, there is no character who deserves this as much as Sarah, especially after she spent 2 movies preparing for the apocalypse and training her son. Dark Fate asks, who is Sarah without John? While this was all about Sarah's journey in Judgment Day, Terminator Dark Fate entirely switched up her storyline and strayed a bit too far from the cohesiveness that Terminator 3 and the Sarah Connor Chronicles had tried to stick to. Instead, this reboot revamped the original storyline to the point where they brutally killed off John Connor's character in the aftermath of Judgment Day's end. The creators decided against casting Arnold Schwarzenegger as the T-800, and instead, Skynet dispatched another T-800 into the past to kill John. This incident took place all the way back in Guatemala in 1988, and after John's death, Sarah finds herself hopelessly lost as she tries to figure out a way to exact revenge on those who had mercilessly killed him off in his teen years. She begins questioning her identity without him in this world, and this reboot's storyline largely revolves around her attempts to process grief. A majority of her arc showed her as a burned-out Terminator hunter who turns to alcohol and directs herself towards the new mission of hunting down other Terminators with the help of anonymous texts that direct her to the time and place that these characters might appear in. In this way, she dedicates herself to wiping out all Terminators for nearly 2 decades and is eventually a wanted figure among the United States authorities. Moreover, Dark Fate also sheds light on how Sarah is lost without the responsibilities of protecting John and stopping the apocalypse.
I've got company!
What if Sarah grew up already knowing the future? Genesis Sarah. If experimenting with Sarah's storyline in Dark Fate wasn't enough, Terminator Genesis placed her in an entirely different context where she already knew the future and was equipped with the knowledge and insights needed to prevent Judgment Day. This knowledge is what pushes her towards preparing for a life where she has to make the tough decision of not becoming John's mother, and this story also takes place in an alternate reality where her character is portrayed by Emilia Clarke. The story begins with Skynet sending a T-1000 to the past, where Sarah was a child, to kill her, but instead, a reprogrammed T-800 saves her and acts as her guardian. The story then follows Sarah as she teaches this droid to be more human, forms an emotional bond with him, and even refers to him as Pops. In this way, the droid soon fills in the space of Sarah's parents, and she even refers to him as her surrogate father before finally learning all about Skynet's intentions through him. The burden of this knowledge, paired with her destiny as John Connor's future mother in a world where the Resistance would have to fight a war, drives Sarah's Pops to train her in handling weapons and facing her destiny. She even works with him to create a makeshift time machine and turns the knowledge of the impending war into a crucial weapon. In fact, the weight of this knowledge even drives her to choose not to be a mother, and she uses every tool at her disposal to ensure a better future for humanity. She comes up with a plan to travel into the future and destroy Skynet to prevent Judgment Day, and strives to create a world where no children are burdened with such responsibilities and can enjoy their childhood instead. Just like most versions of Sarah, this version is also loving, selfless, and dedicated to caring for future generations, even if she wouldn't get any credit for it.
Mom, I'll stop it.
In the Sarah Connor Chronicles, what if fate just keeps chasing her? After talking about T2, Genesis, and Dark Fate, I couldn't possibly wrap things up without talking about Sarah's appearance in the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which was set in the aftermath of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. The show stuck close to the original film's storyline, where Sarah had died of leukemia, and only slightly tweaked the events by establishing that she had cancer and that she would die in 2005. Later on, Sarah was still alive when the show jumped ahead to 2007, but her cancer diagnosis remained the same, and it was implied that she only had limited time. While the story begins after Terminator 2 and places her in 2005, before jumping forward to 2007, it hints at how her diagnosis has turned into a ticking clock that Sarah has been trying to outrun. In the show's first season, John is attacked by a T-888 Terminator, while another Terminator appears in the form of Cameron Phillips and rushes to his rescue. When Sarah hears of this incident and rushes to the scene, Cameron helps her free John from the T-888 Terminator, and the three of them disappear into 2007. This is when Cameron suggests that Sarah should try to prevent Skynet from going online in 2011, while also revealing that she would have already died due to her cancer in 2005 if they had not jumped into the future. In this way, Sarah's chronicles in the show are tied to her attempts to outrun her fate, and she does make a sincere attempt at treating her cancer by training her body and going on medication. However, it's not something that she can evade forever, and a huge chunk of the show revolves around Cameron and Sarah's dedicated attempts to thwart Skynet before she succumbs to the disease. Eventually, the series ends with John traveling to the future while Sarah stays in the present and fights Skynet's origins, thereby steering clear of any final moments on screen. Instead, her ultimate death takes place off-screen, and it's expected that she might die sometime in 2013 if time travel or any other factors that can impact her cancer remain unchanged. Did Sarah ever live long enough to fight in the future war? While Sarah had dedicated herself to fighting in the future war, it is unfortunate how most of her versions have died of illness or have retired in peace. It also led fans to wonder if there was any reality in which Sarah had lived long enough to actually contribute to the future war, and the novelization of Terminator 2 Judgment Day does bring this wish to life. In this novel, Sarah dies when John Connor is in his mid-20s, while she's on a mission to lead a supply convoy from Mexico. Unfortunately, the convoy is ambushed by a squad of HKs, and this is pretty much the only version of Sarah who survives into John's adulthood, travels with his convoy in the future war, and dies as a result of Skynet's ambush. For a character who had dedicated herself to this storyline, this ending perfectly fitted her mythic resistance leader persona, as she died on the battlefield that she had trained for her entire life, instead of passing away due to an illness. Sarah Connor in comics. While that was all about Sarah's journey across the films and TV, she also played an integral role in the Terminator comics. To begin with, Dark Horse Comics' Terminator Endgame was a 3-issue comic series that released in 1992 and focused on a battle between the Machine and Mary Randall. Now you might be wondering how Sarah comes into play here, and as it turns out, this infamous fight took place at the hospital where Sarah was slated to give birth on October 4th, 1984. In this way, the comic centered around Sarah's pregnancy, but there was a lot more to her character arc than just this. In addition to her becoming a mother, this comic was a solid continuation of the original film's tone and stakes, and it portrayed Sarah as a seasoned survivor and a critical figure associated with the impending future war. In the midst of this chaos, this comic does make one major change to the original storyline, as Sarah gives birth to a daughter and lays down the context for an entirely different future. In another Dark Horse comic, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Sarah's character remains more loyal to her original counterpart. In fact, this comic essentially adapts the original T2 film's storyline, wherein Sarah plays an integral role in their fight against Skynet, protects John from the T-1000, and eventually dies due to her illness. Sarah's character also takes the spotlight in Dark Horse Comics' 1990 release, The Terminator Tempest, which is a 4-issue comic series that focuses on the events that take place in the direct aftermath of the original Terminator. The story begins with a resistance cell's attempts to attack the Skynet network about 6 months after John Connor had destroyed the Master Control Central node. As this comic progresses, it does a beautiful job of highlighting the kind of psychological pressure Sarah faces as she deals with a whole new threat of dodging the Terminators that have been sent from the future to track her down and kill her. Finally, Sarah also appeared in the Terminator 2 Judgment Day series published by Malibu Comics, which was divided into 2 parts, Cybernetic Dawn and Nuclear Twilight. Cybernetic Dawn mainly centered around Sarah and John's fight against 3 brand new Terminators who have been sent back to preserve Skynet's creation, and this comic especially filled in many gaps and broke down the events of T2. The second part, Nuclear Twilight, was focused in the year 2029, wherein John sends Kyle Reese and the T-800 to protect Sarah Connor and his own younger self. While these comics did not present any new twisted fates endured by Sarah, they can rather be considered supplementary media that gave us a better look into her story arc and struggles. And on that note, I hope I've done a good job of breaking down what really happened to Sarah Connor after Terminator 2 Judgment Day, as well as her alternate ending versions and so on. While it is unfortunate that she was dropped from the film franchise by Terminator 3 and killed off under the guise of leukemia, she did serve in the future war in her own way in Terminator 2's novelization. Surely that can't make up for her absence in the original film franchise, but it's still nice to know that she could fight alongside her son in some reality, even if he lost her at a young age in the film universe.